Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menonton agenda Awani yang dirakamkan khas untuk malam ini kerana hari ini adalah hari tentang hak asasi manusia. Walau bagaimanapun, hak asasi itu juga perlu dilihat dalam pelbagai konteks. Contohnya, Universal Declaration on Human Rights oleh United Nations ataupun Pertubuhan Bangsa-Bangsa Bersatu meletakkan bahawa security of a person ataupun keselamatan seseorang individu itu adalah antara teras yang begitu penting sekali. Oleh itu, menarik, biasanya orang akan bercakap dengan aktivis dan sebagainya. Tapi malam ini saya ingin bercakap dengan seorang general tentang perkara ini. I would like now to speak in English. I would like to welcome General Vincent K. Brooks for making time to be on Agenda Awani. He is the Commanding General of the U.S. Army for the Pacific. And General, how do you look? Today is a day to commemorate human rights, but the first ingredient of right is the right to ensure security of a person, and then the family, and then community, and the people as a whole. You yourself command thousands of people under you, and you look at a very wide area, you know, from right there maybe in Hawaii all the way to this side of Asia, for example. So how do you look at human rights and ensuring peace and security? Because more and more nowadays, a general has also to play a diplomat rather than just an army strategist, for example. So if you can share with us your take and your views on it.
Well, thanks. Assalamu alaikum first, and thank you, Cam, for letting me join you on the show today. I very much appreciate that as making this visit to Malaysia. Human rights are very important to the United States, and clearly by this commemoration today, for far more than the United States. The United Nations has made that very clear. This is important, and it's the kind of consideration that I, as a military commander, have to always take into account. So whether it's in the approach to how we train our soldiers to make sure that they're focused on protecting populations or operating under rules of engagement, these are all about making sure that the human rights are protected. We emphasize that quite a bit in our partnerships with other countries as well as we're doing military engagements. That human rights are a part of what a disciplined professional force has to account for.
But I'm sure you get a lot of different reactions as you travel across Asia and the Pacific, for example, on this matter, or even in diplomacy as a whole. Because for some it would be the first time that they're meeting a leader of the U.S. Army or U.S. military, for example, and what would their reactions be to you that you have found? Because sometimes, more often than not, this is the age of the internet, and people can just Google anything they want and they form their own perception. So how have your experience been in Asia and the Pacific?
Well, it's been first very exciting. I took command on the 2nd of July and have had a chance to meet many, if not most, of the Army chiefs throughout the Asia-Pacific region, and gotten to know them and gotten their perspective on the challenges that they face. And the reactions have been generally very good. But as we talk about things like human rights, we find that every country is in a different place based on their experiences. And each military is in a different place based on its experiences also. What we try to do is create a way forward where we understand the importance of human rights in things like international peacekeeping. We just had a conference in New Zealand a few months back where we brought together all the Pacific Army chiefs and also some of their operations directors. And the subject was the use of the land forces in peacekeeping operations. Human rights has to be one of the topics, and it was discussed at that time. So I think there's a keenness and an awareness of this.
You are the first four-star general to be in command of U.S. Army in Asia Pacific for the first time in maybe 40 years, 4 decades. And if the importance of Asia Pacific has increased for the U.S. military, what does this actually translate to in terms of military strategies? What would the phrase rebalancing towards Asia by the U.S. be as far as your objective and your military command are concerned?
Well, of course, I feel very honored to be the first four-star general since 1974, which was the last time we had a four-star general in U.S. Army Pacific. And that ran for a period of time, from 1957 to 1974. There was a view that we needed to reduce our military presence to a degree at that point in time, and I know that countries in the region felt less contact with the United States Army as a result of that. Our interests have never departed from the Asia-Pacific region, though. We're a Pacific nation. We have lots of friends in the region, and we certainly have interests, like many countries do, in the great growth of economies around this region of the world. And so that then translates to a strategy that includes military activity in partnership with diplomatic and economic activity.
Okay.
And this is really the essence of the strategic rebalance. And I think rebalance is a good term.
Okay.
Several have been used, but the idea that this is about shifting weight, not losing balance, not starting again, not putting a foot in a place where it has not been, but shifting weight. And we clearly have had a long history here.
The Navy and Air Force has long had 4-star commanders in these parts of the world. How would the Army now, the U.S. Army, benefit from this? And what would be the olive branch to the rest of the people out there in the respective countries and militaries around this area? Because the U.S. Army now has a 4-star general in charge.
Well, 26 of the 36 countries have an Army general, a 4-star general, that's their chief of defense. And so it opens doors that were harder to open before. Of course, I follow a series of great lieutenant general, 3-star generals who've been tremendous commanders, many of whom had close relationships with Malaysia. In this case, we've seen a few more doors have opened up as a result. We've had some direct meetings with ministers of defense, for example, and that's a level that we previously would not have had access to. More importantly, across the services within U.S. Pacific Command, you mentioned the Air Force and the Navy, who have long since had 4-star generals. There's a peer relationship that opens here and opens the door to increased cooperation among the services that improves the way the United States military operates with countries around the region. We take a joint approach to solving most complex problems, and the door is now open to do that.
Okay, I have to go for the first commercial break, but once we are back, of course, you know, military strategies have to look at the immediate threats. And there's still a few hotspots around the Asia Pacific that I'm sure you really have to look at as priority. So if I can tap into your large amount of knowledge on this matter, which areas under your command do you look as the most important hotspots to be addressed? And in the whole phrase of rebalancing the power, how does the rebalancing strategy work for the deployment of your resources and attention? That we'll discuss after this short break. Anda masih menonton Agenda Awani dan saya masih bersama dengan komander bagi tentera Amerika di Asia dan Pasifik. And I would like to continue my discussion with General Brooks and the hotspots left. You know, Vietnam War has come and gone, but there are other places in Asia and the Pacific that are of concern to a lot of security analysts and even to the layman. So how does that play into how you command the U.S. Army forces around this area?
I think it's important first to say that I try to take a longer view. I mean, there have been wars in the region, there have been conflicts of various sorts, hotspots that have turned into much bigger issues. But there's a greater relationship beyond there that I think we have to pay attention to. So where are we now? We're in a framework of dialogue among nations. U.S. Pacific Command, for example, has been able to underwrite security and stability, and that has led to prosperity for many countries around the region, including Malaysia. And this is what we really want to concentrate on. Where there are hotspots, we seek to find that there's room for dialogue and cooperation, where miscalculation can be prevented by having relationship in advance of a problem, and where diplomatic solutions can be achieved to move through the hotspots.
We've seen, and we were surprised by how fast the agreement on nuclear disarmament between U.S. and Iran, for example. And maybe for a lot of us in this part of East Asia, looking at North Korea, maybe hoping for the same breakthrough. Do you see that in the same light on discourse and diplomacy?
Well, I think we have to realize that in diplomatic circles, things move at their own pace. And so while one would always hope for a diplomatic breakthrough on any issue that's being discussed, whether it's on boundaries or whether it's on nuclear disarmament, it takes time. And while we are seeing some progress now in that discussion, it didn't begin overnight.
Yes.
And this has gone on for many, many years to try to get doors open. I think that's an important point, that it takes persistence. It takes a longer view, whether it's through security or diplomatic means, to cause change in a region that is positive and benefits all. And this is a very important approach.
There's a lot of also non-traditional threats. You know, it's not just one nation's army against another nation's army. Now you've got terrorism and terrorism. You've got piracy over the high seas that's threatening a lot of the peace, stability, and also wealth creation, as the sea is a very important trade route. And we know that the Straits of Malacca, for example, half of the world cargoes will pass by through that area. So how do you command for the U.S. Army to look at all this? Because it seems to be a very wide-ranging areas to cover, and surely the preparation will also have to account for all that.
Well, economies ultimately originate and terminate in populations.
Okay.
It happens on land. Security occurs where people are.
Okay.
Disasters that have devastating consequences affect human lives in places where people live. These are all places for the Army to work. And so we find ourselves focused on things like humanitarian assistance and disaster response, and working with militaries around the region, as well as other government agencies that can respond in the time of crisis. We see more than 82%, I guess in 2011, of the number of casualties or fatalities that occurred through humanitarian disasters and natural disasters occurred in this region. And so there are points of common interest among those global threats that you talked about. Disasters, terrorism, proliferation of dangerous technologies, piracy, and each one of these provides us an opportunity for coordination with militaries around the region, and we're part of that.
How do you keep your men and women in your force to be ready all the time? Because sometimes coming to some parts of Asia, like Southeast Asia, where it's most of the time very peaceful and quiet in terms of lack of conflict and stuff, and managing forces in peacetime sometimes can be a challenge to itself.
Well, we're very fortunate. We have tremendous soldiers, and we've got a tremendously professional force that has lots of experience. And they're excited whenever they can go to places and meet other professionals, other colleagues in the same business, the profession of arms, who are focused on protecting their population and helping advance their nation's interests. There are many opportunities for us to do that. And so we simply share with them that we have exercises with friends like Malaysia, and that they may have an opportunity to go to a place where they've not been before and meet others like them who are dedicated servants for their country. And this excites them quite a bit. And we do appreciate the opportunity to exercise with countries like this one in that kind of a circumstance.
I have to ask you this question because sometimes what happened in the U.S. is covered by the international local media more than what happened in Malaysia or around the region. And the budget cuts in the U.S., for example, what's happening in Capitol Hill and all, the U.S. budget deficit, all this over the years has seen also the military spending coming under pressure, and there's a lot of cuts down that road too. So you have to manage a very big force in a very large area. So how do you look at going forward, trimming down on the cost but being more cost effective in certain areas? Because I'm sure the Army and the bureaucracy of the Army also has this to consider.
Well, as one of the Army's senior commanders, I certainly am part of the discussions that we have on changing our size, changing our composition. But at the same time, as a field commander, I'm on the end of the Army that creates the demand for whatever forces and structures we have, and how to best utilize them in a way that can make a difference for our nation. And so it's an exciting time. It is challenging as well, to be sure, and it is visible. Globally, we are observed. I think it's worth noting, the United States Army is 238 years old. And we have a constitution that has endured for many generations, as you well know.
Yeah.
And there's something about that that ought to be beheld here as we are going through fiscal challenges and pressures. We're making changes that we know we must make and have chosen to make. And we're going to be fine when it's all said and done. In the meantime, we'll remain engaged in the region with countries like Malaysia.
Wouldn't your colleagues in the Malaysian Army, Indonesian Army, or even any other leaders of armies around this region be so envious of the U.S. Army? Because even with budget cutback, is still one of the biggest spender in terms of military expenditure as compared to other countries.
Well, certainly in raw monetary amounts, that's true. And percentage of gross domestic product, there are many who are larger than we are and spend quite a bit more. But what we want to do is be fiscally wise with the resources that are given to us by our nation to make the best use of what has been given and make a difference internationally, not just domestically, and that's why we've been committed as we have in U.S. Army Pacific.
Okay, I have to go for the last break, but once we are back, I would like to go and get your own stories of your experience around this area, because sometimes it's the same for me when I go to other places that had or never had seen any Malaysians before, and I will have to represent everything else, even though I'm just a journalist and I don't do politics and stuff. It would be the same for you, even though you're in the U.S. Army, but people of these parts of the world would ask you about so many other things about the U.S. That we'll discuss after the short break. Kita masih membincangkan tentang strategi militeri ataupun ketenteraan Amerika di rantau Asia Pasifik, dan kita ada komander untuk askar Amerika. Oleh itu saya ingin meneruskan perbincangan dengan General Vincent Brooks. I would like to now go to maybe as you go around the region, I'm sure you have to be the single voice for the U.S. in a lot of maybe instances. So if you can recount to us how perception and reality sometimes can be so different when it comes to the United States of America, because the word United States represents so many things, from pop culture right up until wars, and then you sometimes have to be in between all these communities that may be throwing all these queries to you.
Well, it is an interesting experience to be a military general, but also to be part ambassador as I go around and express what the United States is. There really is no substitute for first-hand experience with other cultures. And so whether it's Malaysians who get to meet someone from the United States of America, and even this show is a part of meeting someone from the United States, it becomes far clearer who we are and what we do, what we value, by just getting to know one another. And our embassy does things to help that all the time right here in the country. And we encourage people to take advantage of that. They're right here. America's right here with you all the time. But when someone like myself comes through the region, or when our soldiers come for an exercise, it's a chance to get to know us much, much better. There are often misperceptions about what the United States is, what it stands for, how we
What's
do
the
things.
main misperception that you have encountered?
Well, often it is a perception of frustrations about U.S. policies, and they're not well understood in terms of what we do. Why would we highlight human rights? Well, because it's important for all, not just for us, as you talked about at the opening of the show. What is it that we do in other countries, and why would we stay so long in some places? And it's to create a commitment that leads to prosperity over time, and we've demonstrated that many, many times in the Asia-Pacific area, that long-term commitments can lead to prosperity and a framework for countries to work together, not for conquest, but for the prosperity of those who've become partners with one another.
So would Iraq and Afghanistan be still among the main questions thrown to you?
Oh yes, we're asked about it all the time, and you know, there are some things that are confusing as they look at our approach. Decisions that are made, but these are political decisions that are made. And what we see is committed military persons who have dedicated themselves to making a difference, protecting lives, as you talked about at the beginning, helping to protect populations, bringing about security forces that are able to do that for themselves in their own country, under their own political designs. And then those countries make their own choices, and this is very important.
Would the burden of would the burden of military commanders now be more and more also about bringing in the non-military aspects to the table to advise the commander-in-chief, for example, in areas of conflict like Iraq or Afghanistan, because it will be your men and yourself on ground, you know, getting back each and every kind of information. It's not just military, it will be social information, economic and security information, and that will be conveyed back to the Commander-in-Chief. So more and more, the role of a military commander in the US military now will also have to deal with other aspects which are non-military for the Commander-in-Chief to make the final decision.
Well, you're absolutely right. And we find that security by itself is not enough. Security has to be a partner to other things: economic growth and development, good governance, the protection of human rights. These are all characteristics of what we try to help share with any country with whom we're doing work, like Iraq, Afghanistan, as you talked about. But even in the design of exercises that we do with our friends throughout the region, these are important concepts that have to be part of what's done. And it is part of the advice that we give on how the military instrument can be used as part of a greater commitment by the U.S. government or any other government in that case. Military activities can complement diplomatic activities, economic activities, social activities, so that there is a complete improvement in a variety of areas, not just in security.
It looks so much that in the 21st century, a military commander, what more if they are from the US, have to be this 360 degrees well-rounded person, which not only strategic military mind, but also diplomacy thrown in, the ability to absorb other people's culture. So I know there's training at West Point, and for example, and you have a stellar track record, both while studying and in your military career. So how do you look at coming out with this sort of perfect soldier and military commander? Because, you know, there's so much to do in the 21st century, not just what you're given, but also as you go around, you've got to improvise, for example. So how do you see this, throwing the experience of yourself into the picture?
Well, it does begin in how we develop our leaders from the start. A recognition that cultures are important, that interpersonal relationships matter, and also technical skill that marks one as a professional. These are all important, and that's the foundation upon which all developmental work begins. But over time, we realize that there is continuous learning and development. As I mentioned, there's no substitute for personal interaction and learning from another culture directly. And as much as we can continue to do exercises around the region, or to send subject matter experts in one direction or another, or have Malaysians attending the United States Military Academy, the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, as you have this year. You've got a cadet in each one of those academies, which is tremendous. These are ways to make the connection. We have to continue to learn, we continue to develop, and we value that in building what we call adaptive leaders who can respond to a variety of circumstances and see strategically, not tactically, where they fit in. And where their actions can make an impact, positively or negatively.
Thank you so much, General Brooks, for making time to be on this show. And I'm sure the next time we look across the horizon, we'll be looking forward to see you and your men and see how what we've discussed here have translated into how they approach people over here. Terima kasih kepada anda yang telah menonton. Hantarkan pandangan anda sendiri, ada pelbagai cara, ada Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube dan sebagainya, ataupun muat turun aplikasi mudah alih iOS dan Android Astro Awani. Sekian, jumpa lagi, dan sementara itu hantarkan juga apa juga pandangan anda dalam hashtag Awani Banjir jika ada lagi yang anda ingin sumbangkan dalam perkara itu. Sekian, selamat malam dan terima kasih. Terima kasih.